You guys, can you hear me okay? I can't hear you.
Hello?
Oh, there you go. All
Yes.
right. Great. Okay. I'm going to record this because I have somebody else that wants to watch this. Oh, looks like it's already recording. Cool. All right. So I am going to blow through this as fast as I can. We got about 45 minutes because this is some kind of trial version of Zoom. I have to sign up for the commercials version, which I just was too lazy to do. So,
Yes.
I got to get through this, I think, in 40 minutes, which I think we can do. So I'm going to cover these 5 basic concepts. Probably try to spend 7 or 8 minutes on each one. These are the different pieces of blockchain technology that all work together to make things like Bitcoin do what it does. And it's important to note that they all connect in some way. They like any one piece of the idea of saying a hash or just consensus or just public key cryptography. None of those things by themselves make a secure blockchain. The key to all of this thing is the fact that they all exist together in this sort of homogenized technology. So first thing is where the block is stored. So the blockchain is a connection of blocks. And the chain is this piece here, this hash of the previous block header, right? So, and stop me if you guys have any questions. So each block is linked to its previous block with this hash. And that is the chain. And that's part of what makes it be secure is this building upon one block building upon another, like a very tall stack of dominoes or something like that. So there are 3 terms that I've listed here. Transactions, which are when somebody wants to send coins from one person to another person. That's a transaction. It says, I have 10 coins. I want to send it to somebody else. I make a transaction. UTXO, which is an acronym. It's a shortened acronym that says unspent is the U, TX is transaction, and O is output. So it's an unspent transaction output. You'll hear UTXO a lot in blockchain. And that really represents what a coin is. It means that there's value stored that has not yet been spent. And so that's really what the coins are. And then there's this special kind of transaction that creates coins out of thin air. And these are created by the miners, and it's called the Coinbase transaction. Not to be confused with the company Coinbase. They actually named the company after this concept. But you will hear a lot in any blockchain, Coinbase transaction. And that means the first transaction in the block, which is awarded to the miner. And that's how new currency gets printed. So if you think of, when the Fed is printing dollar bills, well, in Bitcoin, miners are printing Bitcoin through this chain Coinbase transaction. So it's a transaction that the miner awards to himself as he mines a block, and it has no inputs. It's just created out of thin air. So that's where new coins come from, and that's what mining means. And when I talk about Bitcoin, I also talk about Dynamo because Dynamo is forked from Bitcoin. I'm going to do a separate talk about why Dynamo is special and not just a copy of Bitcoin, but all of these things apply to Dynamo at its core. Right? So here's an example of how inputs and outputs are linked in transactions. So there's a coin-based transaction that says there's 100,000 coins, whatever it is. And then I take 90 of those, 40,000 I send here and 50,000 I send here. There's still 10,000 left over unspent. And then somebody of that 40,000 takes 30,000 and sends it over here. This still has 10,000 unspent, right? And then the 30,000, he sends 20,000 over here. All of these outputs are going into other inputs that are then being unspent, meaning storing value. So that's what the UTXO is just a series, a whole bunch of unspent transactions. And so in my wallet, quote unquote, which we're going to learn that wallets don't actually store coins, but wallets are really collections of these unspent outputs. Yep. So that's all it is. And so there's no account. It's not like a bank account. There's no balance. There's no debits and credits or anything like that. It's just a series of inputs and outputs. That's all that the blockchain is. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about SHA-256. SHA-256 is pervasive in blockchain. It's a very important concept that involves some of the cryptography. So SHA-256 is a one-way hash. That means the data that goes in gets so scrambled up that there's no way to take the output and ever figure out what was input. It's a completely random function. And so as a demonstration, I went to this online website where you can just type stuff in and it tells you the SHA-256 hash. And it's a mathematical function that creates this. And so you see if I type hi there, I get this hash back, right? And hashes are always 32 bytes. So these are hex numbers, but this doesn't really matter. But they're always the same length. No matter how much data you put in, you're always going to get exactly 32 bytes of data back. So I put hi there and I got this. And then I typed hi there 1, and you could see like not a single digit of the output is the same as hi there, right? So one tiny change in the input resulted in a completely different output. So that's a very important concept, that this is a big sort of blender that just completely randomly, forever, irretrievably mixes up the input into something that's an output. The other thing I want to cover is this Merkle root. I'm actually going to cover that a little bit later, but there's a concept of recursive hashes. So all of the transactions that get processed in a block are kind of at the bottom, and then they get hashed. So this and this get hashed together, and that makes a new hash. And then this and this get hashed together, and that makes a new hash. And then this and this get hashed together, and that makes a new hash. And that hash of all the hashes that kind of bubble up, this one single hash is called the Merkle root. And it's because it's a Merkle tree, and there's a guy named Merkle that invented this concept. But the thing to take away from this is, no matter how big this tree is, no matter how many transactions there are, because all of these hashes depend on the hashes below it. So this hash depends on these two. This hash depends on these two. This hash depends on these two, right? Even if this is 10, 20, 100 levels deep, if I change D just a little tiny bit, this thing changes completely, right? And so what you can say is, if this thing equals what I think it should equal, I don't have to go check all these other ones. All I have to do is check this one. So it's an important concept, that the Merkle root represents the depth of all the transactions in the tree, and it lets you quickly check if all those transactions are valid. So that's an important concept. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about wallets. So everybody thinks wallet stores money, which it's a horrible name, because in blockchain, wallets do not store money. Wallets store private keys, and a private key is just a big ass number, basically. but that key can unlock a transaction on the chain. So remember, value is stored as an unspent output on the blockchain, which everybody can see. You can go to our Dynamo Block Explorer and you can see every single transaction that's happened so far in the last 5 or 6 days. Same thing with Bitcoin and Ethereum. They all have block explorers, and you can see who has all the coins. Now, the who is just a number, right? It doesn't mean anything because it's a transaction ID. It's not like it says, oh, Shaun has 10 Ethereum. You're never going to see that. You're going to see some long number that represents my public key. And the key here, no pun, is that private keys can be used to derive a public key. And then I can release my public key to the world with a signature. And then anyone in the world can take my public key and my signature and with absolute certainty say, yes, this was generated by you. You own this, right? So that's why the private keys are super important to keep safe. And the wallet is the thing that stores the private keys. So I put this little diagram on the side that gives you some of the process of how that works. And it's very, very complicated. A lot of this stuff is where a lot of the public key cryptography comes in. It's actually based on elliptic curves. And there's a lot of research in this area. But the key thing to understand is wallets do not store coins. They store private keys, and private keys unlock unspent outputs on the blockchain. So if you lose your private keys, you lose all of your, quote unquote money that's on the chain. All right. So that's that. All right. So now we're going to get into how the sort of system works, right? These are the pieces of it. So a full node is a piece of software. In our case, it's called Dynamo server. In Bitcoin, it's called Bitcoin D. Ethereum has their own version of the full node. But basically, the full node is the software that runs the server that does all of the computation to pass information around and build the blockchain. So each server usually runs on just one computer, and you'll see that there are how many when a blockchain says they have X number of nodes, it usually means how many full nodes they have. So each full node assembles the block, but it also keeps track of pending transactions. So from my wallet, I send a transaction that says, I got 10 coins. I want to send it to Bob. And I hook up to a full node and I say, send 10 coins to Bob. The full node is going to make a note of it in its thing called a mempool. The mempool is all the pending transactions that have not yet been mined. So these are unconfirmed transactions. They're waiting to be processed, let's call it, right? It's getting in a line. And for every transaction that the full node gets, it tells all the other nodes, and all the nodes are constantly talking back and forth to each other. And so full node 1 tells full node 2, hey, send 10 coins to Bob. Full node 2 tells full node 3. Full node 3 will also go back and tell full node 1, hey, send 10 coins to Bob. But because I've assigned a transaction ID, full node 1 won't do it again. It'll say, oh, you know what? I already know about that one. I'm going to disregard it. And so the mempool will hold all the pending transactions waiting to be mined. And you'll see when currencies get very busy, the mempool will grow very large. So right now, because Bitcoin is so hot, there's something like 400,000 transactions sitting in the mempool waiting to be mined because there's just not enough throughput. There's so much demand to use Bitcoin that the network just can't handle it. It's been that way for a couple months now. It's crazy. So it takes like a day to get your transaction processed. So the mempool holds temporary transactions. All right. So now I want to talk. Yep.
I mean, that's only the 400,000 is only in the single machine, single server.
remember, it's in every server, right?
Okay.
Every transaction gets relayed to every server. So if this node just disappears and ceases to exist, all the other nodes are going to have exact full copies of everything. So nodes can come and go without any impact to the network whatsoever, because it's immediate. All the information is immediately relayed to other nodes. Yeah. So that's part of the fault tolerance of this system, is that as long as you have two nodes running, the system continues on. Obviously, it can't run with one node because it has nobody to talk to. So, right. So you have to have at least two nodes. Yep. But if you have 10 nodes and 9 of them or 8 of them die, those 2 other nodes are just going to keep on trucking. So everything is replicated across all servers, including the mempool and the blockchain. Okay, so I want to talk about mining. So we hear a lot about mining Bitcoin or mining Ethereum and so on. Mining it's kind of like a game, and the game is to solve a mathematical problem. The mathematical problem actually happens to be the block hash, which is that linking thing that links. Remember, we talked about back here, hash of previous block header. So the mining problem is solving this hash. That's it. But I want to talk a little bit about the game theory of it. So imagine a game where there's 3 people playing, and they each have 2 6-sided dice. And the goal of the game is to roll under a 7, right? And so each player can roll in a turn, and then whoever rolls under a 7 first wins. And so you see here, I have this little example: 10, 8, 9, nobody wins. 9, 11, 8, nobody wins. Oh, player 1 rolls a 6, he rolls a 9 and a 12, player 1 wins, right? So on the third roll, player 1 wins. And what they winning, quote unquote, means you get the reward from the block that was mined. Right. So when you're the winner, you get to assign yourself that award. Now, you'll notice I made it sort of very arbitrary that only one person won. Possibly, 2 people could win, or all 3 people, right? Like, it's possible that everybody wins simultaneously. It's also not limited to this kind of round thing. Like, it's not like round 1, round 2, round 3. It's kind of like everybody's jumping in and trying to find the sample, the solution all at the same time. And so you'll see later on when I show you the consensus diagram, there's a way that sort of gets worked out. But basically, there's a whole bunch of miners talking to full nodes saying, I want to play the game. The full node says, okay, here's the problem. You go solve it. If you solve it first, you win, right? So there's a concept of difficulty, right? So the idea is you adjust the difficulty of the game so that no matter how many people are playing and no matter how fast they're rolling, the blocks will get solved at a constant rate, right? So Bitcoin has a target time of 10 minutes, right? Dogecoin is 1 minute, Ethereum 13 seconds, and for Dynamo, I set it at 15 seconds, right? So what happens is, let's say that people are rolling really, really fast, and they win the game once a second, but we want to make sure that there's only a winner every 10 seconds. So we make it harder, and we say, instead of having to roll under an 8, now you got to roll under a 7, and people still roll really, really fast, and they win after 3 seconds. Now you got to roll under a 6. Now you got to roll under 5, right? You keep lowering the number that you have to roll under until you get to that 10-second limit. So there's this concept of difficulty, and you'll see Ethereum has a network difficulty, Bitcoin has a network difficulty, and Dynamo has a network difficulty. The more people that mine, the higher the difficulty goes, right? So then it takes longer to mine the block, which then makes it kind of even out. So there's this concept of dynamic adjustment, this continuous dynamic adjustment, right? So, right, in blockchain mining, winning means you get the reward, right? So for Bitcoin, it's 6.25 Bitcoin. For Ethereum, it's 2. For Dynamo, I set it at 1 Dynamo, right? So whoever gets to mine the Ethereum block, whoever solves the problem first, they get 2 Ethereum. And then the next 13 seconds, somebody else solves it, and somebody else solves it, and it keeps on going like that. The rolling of the dice is trying to find a SHA-256 hash that has a certain number of zeros in front. And I think for Bitcoin, it's like 23 zeros right now. So imagine trying to find a number that has 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, all the way to 23, right? And then this. And remember, because SHA is like this random scrambler, there's no way to pick an input that will result in a certain output. It's just a complete guess. And because SHA is a mathematically, computationally intensive activity, you need a lot of computer power to compute many, many SHA-256s very fast. And so you just keep guessing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and they just count on down until they find a hash that has the right number of zeros in front based on whatever everybody agrees is the quote unquote current difficulty. So when a miner gets a problem, he says, okay, let me mix it all up and then let me just start guessing. And as soon as I guess the result, I send it back to the full node and I say, hey, I won, I guessed it. You tell me if I'm right. And then the full node tells them if they're right or not. So that's why SHA-256 is important in this implementation. Ethereum actually uses a slightly different algorithm. Raven uses a different one. A lot of different things. And I've developed my own custom scripting one. It involves some hashing, but there's some other stuff involved. So every coin uses slightly different ways of doing this, but it's all computationally intensive, right? It takes a lot of adding and subtracting and all that stuff. Okay, so this is the overall flow. So the miner says, what transactions do you have for me? Right? And remember, the mempool is full of all these transactions. So then the full node says, here's a bunch of transactions you can mine, okay? The miner takes that, assembles a block, hashes until it gets an answer that's less than the difficulty, and then says, hey, I got an answer. The full node says, yep, I agree, you're good. And then when the full node says, yes, I agree, you're good, he also tells his neighbors, I've got a guy who just solved the block. What do you think about that? And then the full node will say, yep, looks good. And then he'll tell his neighbors, right? And so by that way, newly mined blocks get remove the transactions from the mempool. So let's say that block had 100 transactions. All those transactions get stuck into the block. They get mined and agreed on. And then that block gets transmitted around the whole network. Each full node that says, yep, I agree, takes all those transactions out of his mempool because they're no more temporary, it's no longer pending, and then passes the block on to the next guy. So that's the process of mining. And the quote unquote answer, right? This answer that I got is the proof of work. It's the proof that I did all that work to get that number of zeros in front of the hash. If we have time at the end, I'm going to show you some real world stuff on Bitcoin, some of the difficulty. So this is how consensus works. So these are all, let's say, nodes, right? These are all computers, people running full nodes, right? And here's 3 different miners, right? And the miners are saying, what transactions you got? Okay, here's a bunch. Let me mine, right? And they're all doing this, right? And they're all kind of working off the same set. At about the same time, right? So I have block 9, everybody agrees. Block 10, everybody agrees. Now we're working on block 11, right? So miner comes in and says, I'm working on block 11. What do you got for me? This guy comes in and asks him, I'm working on block 11. What do you got for me, right? And then they both start mining. And let's say they come up with the answer just about the same amount of time. He says, I found 11A. It's a valid block. It's all good. Reports it to him. He agrees. He tells his neighbor, I got 11A. Yep, I agree, right? I agree. I found 11B, right? At the same time, I agree. Maybe he passes it here, or maybe he gets it first, kind of depends, right? But let's say that the sort of place where they're not sure is here. And so this guy says, well, I got 9, it's good. I got 10, it's good. But now I have 2 candidates. I'm not really sure, which one to do. So I'm going to keep both of them. This is called a fork. And forking happens all the time. The chain forks, right? But it usually only forks for about 1 or maybe 2 blocks, because what happens in the next couple of seconds is this guy who already accepted block 11 found block 12, and he builds on 11B, right? He agreed that 11B was good. He took 11B and started building 12, and he says, I got 12. Well, now I have a chain that has 12 depth, right? These other ones only have 11. When this guy says, I got a chain that's 12 deep, he says, I got a chain that's 12 deep. Oh, I only got 11. So 11A is no good. I'm throwing it out. Same, right? Over here, well, I took 11B. I never heard about 11A. So, yep, I'm taking that one. I'm taking that one. These two guys never really participated, so they just know that there's a new block. And then everybody starts building on top of block 12, right? Everybody agrees that that's the new chain. 11A got basically thrown away. This guy got lost. This node says, sorry, dude, you didn't get there fast enough, or we didn't all agree that it was you. This one says, yes, you won. And so then he gets to put it in his pile of coins to keep. And then everybody moves on to block 12. So that's how consensus works. It's basically saying whoever has the longest one, that's the one we're going to mine and continue to work off of. All right. So, so longest chain always wins. It's also called most work performed, but it's basically the highest block number. Whichever chain has the highest block number, that's the one that everybody agrees. Now, because of this forking, you sometimes have to wait a little bit to let things sort out. After about 6 blocks of confirmation, that's when it's pretty much set in stone. Like, nobody's going to be able to go back and redo all of that work, because you would need to have so many computers. Right? Imagine this, right? There's 7 computers here. I would need to have 8 computers to overpower this network and say, my chain is right. I'm going to take over, right? That's called a 51% attack. It sometimes does happen to smaller chains, but as long as all of these nodes are not bad actors, right, then you're okay. So, right, after a few blocks are chained, if you have 7 mining, if I'm a bad guy and I come in with 2 servers and I try to tell you, no, these are my blocks and I won all these blocks except this, none of them are going to ever agree, and none of them are going to start mining off of my chain. My chain will always be shortest. So it's important to realize how the depth of the chain, right? Again, back to this previous hash, all the work that it took to make that hash, plus all the work that it took to make this hash, plus all the work that it took to make this hash, right? After 6 of these, it's almost impossible to fake out the system. You'd need so many computers to fake out the system that it's just not possible. So consensus works best, right, when there's a large number of full nodes. So let me go to, I want to bring up, we can look at briefly. I only got about 7 or 8 minutes here. Bitcoin difficulty. Okay. So let's see. All right. So this is the network difficulty expressed in T, which is terahash, which is 10 to the 12. So what's more than a billion? I don't know. Right, a tera, right? So it's 1,000 billion. And remember when we talked about like rolling the dice? So imagine like rolling a dice once a second, right? Or rolling a dice 1,000,000 times a second. That would be a mega hash, right? These guys roll the dice 1,000 billion times a second, right? And so the overall structure is right now 22,000 billion hashes per second, right? That's how many the overall network is calculating. Let's see if there's network activity says. Oh yeah, here you go. Mempool transaction count, right? So how many transactions are currently sitting in the mempool, right? 40-something thousand or 24,000, right? There's 24,000 transactions waiting to be processed because there's just so many people trying to get on to this thing. Unspent transaction outputs, right? This is your UTXOs. How many UTXOs are there, right? This is UTXO. How many UTXOs are there on the blockchain? Right now, there's 76 million unspent transactions. So there's 76 million different pieces of Bitcoin that are available to be sent somewhere else. See what wallet activity is. Yeah, that's kind of boring. All right. Yeah, let's do the mining information. Total hash rate. Miners revenue. Let's see. I want to see if there's number of Bitcoin nodes. Yeah, let's see. So this is okay. How many Bitcoin nodes are there? Let's see. I don't know if there's a graph here somewhere. Yeah, here we go. So January 29th, there's 76,000 Bitcoin nodes, 76,000 computers running Bitcoin full node. There's actually even more Ethereum. I think it's more than 100,000. So it's crazy just how many computers are running. And this is a measure of the network strength, right? That there's just so many people running this software. I bet if we look at Dogecoin, it's probably much, much less, right? Oops. Dogecoin. Yeah. Let's see how many nodes they got. Pure Explorer. Let's see. No, that's just a list of nodes. Let's see if they have a number. And then you'll see. Now you can't really always really compare hash rate because of the way that hash rate works. It is different by coins. Let's see how many. That's Bitcoin. Yeah, I don't know. You would see. I would guess there's like maybe a few thousand Dogecoin, as opposed to 70 or 100,000 in Bitcoin and Ethereum. So a signal of the network strength is the number of nodes you're running. So one of the things that we want to be able to brag about when we start to launch Dynamo, we have so many nodes, we have so much hash power, we have so many miners, because all of those things are a measure of how decentralized it is and how secure it is. So those are important things for us to try to beef up. All right, so that's all I got. I actually guess about 5 minutes early. What kind of questions you got? Any questions, or you want to mull it over and ask later? Or what do you think?
I will ask something.
Go for it.
Okay. Sorry if I will ask this to the because I really don't know anything about mining and all. So for hash, I'm looking at the page where it says SHA256 hash, the example, where you said the 23 numbers are being mined.
This one here?
For example, yep.
Uh-huh.
So these numbers, hash means they show the probability of 23 numbers, like the combination, different combinations.
Yep.
Okay,
So,
and the number of it depends on the requirement of the coin being mined. Like for Bitcoin, it's different quantity. Ethereum has different quantity as well.
Yep.
Okay, and then for the neighbor node, you call it neighbor, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so the node is the checker
they're
the
all
checker of the first node.
They're all checkers, right? They all have to agree because they're all talking back and forth to each other constantly. Yep.
Before they have to all the nodes connected have to confirm it first before they send it to the network that hash is already mined. Is that right?
That the block. So these numbers are called block height. So this is block height 9, block height 10, block height 11. And so all the nodes eventually agree by this consensus mechanism which block 11 is the quote unquote right one, right? If they get a block from a miner that's just bad, that is wrong because it doesn't have the right proof of work or it has wrong transaction, right? They'll just reject that right away. It won't even get into the network. But if there's two that are kind of competing, the network is going to decide for a little bit, like, which one do I want, 11A or 11B?
Yeah, then let's check it again, right?
Yeah, and then they'll all check it again.
Run again. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, and consensus, it means narrowing the hash or the block.
It means that the overall system agrees on which chain is the longest. So if, and again, in this case where there's two miners who both have valid blocks that find them at about the same time, depending on the timing of when 11A makes it around or 11B makes it around, and then finally 12 gets mined up on top of one of those two, right? That all decides kind of which guy, quote unquote, wins, right? So in my example, I said 11B wins because this guy said, hey, I got 11B. Right. He said, hey, I got 11B. The miner said, hey, give me some transactions. And where are you at? Well, I'm at 11B. Here's a bunch of transactions. He says, oh, I got 12. So he finds 12, right, before anybody else does. And then as soon as 12 starts making it around, and the 12 that's on top of 11B is the key thing, then 11B gets accepted and people start mining on top of 11B plus 12. So it all kind of just depends on the timing. But this kind of thing happens all the time where people are racing to try to be the longest chain. So that's really how consensus works. Let me show you too. I can show you actual numbers for Dynamo, because we have a nice little explorer going. There's only one. We don't have an explorer going. What happened to our explorer? Hold on one second. Start.
I think this meeting will end in 1 minute.
In a couple of minutes, yeah. It's gonna. I think it's gonna. Well, anyway,
the limit of Zoom.
Yeah, I think it says 40 minutes. Anyway, you could see some of our statistics here, like how many blocks we have and what the difficulty is, what the block time is, all those things. So so you can go to this URL and see actual stuff for us. But yeah. All right, cool. So mull that over, and then maybe like next week we'll do another one of these on specifically what Dynamo does better than Bitcoin, and why there's some, where I've added some of the features, and we can actually look at the wallet in Dynamo and some of the block explorer we'll get working too. So cool.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. See ya.